Welcome to Small Talk, where each week we sit down to discuss the sermon-based small group questions at Wallula Christian Church.
Hello and welcome back to Wallula's weekly podcast. My name is Zach Boland, student pastor here at Wallula Christian Church. I'm joined by Craig Archer, worship pastor, and Lance Kaufman, lead pastor. We are glad that you're with us today. It's a special day, finishing up the book of Acts. Acts chapter 28. We'll be going over the small group questions here. We're Paul and Rome, and we forgot the cake. We talked about it last week. We were going to celebrate with something big. And sorry, just like in the book of Acts, we left you hanging. We're not quite sure. I thought that was a good time. I don't know what really happened.
They weren't going to get cake anyway.
Them?
Just us.
Oh, just us. Right.
Yeah,
but I mean, like,
either way,
what happens next? We don't know. It's kind of we're left hanging from the book of Acts.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe the next book study will do a cake, or for our 100th. We did find out, just a correction from last week. We talked about, I forget the context of it, but that, we for sure did 100. We talked about how we've done 100.
Felt pretty confident about that.
Pretty confident. We'd done 100 of these, and it turns out we are not at all at 100. We're in the low 80s, I believe.
Yeah, I think this one that we're doing right now, I think it's 84.
Okay, yeah. So
I think that's what it was.
We got about 15 left.
Something like that.
Yeah, feels like 100.
Yeah. So take that for what it is. But maybe on the 100th we'll bust out a cake or presents for each other.
Wow.
I'm setting the bar high. We'll see. Or we'll receive presents and gifts. Twinkies. There you go.
Yeah, something.
Some sort of centennial.
Presents. So stick around, because who knows what's
Who knows?
happen.
We don't even know.
Again, you won't get anything.
No, yeah.
Yeah. But we might have cake.
We might have cake.
Yeah.
Or we may forget it all. But we'll see. That's exciting. We'll find out in 16 episodes. But we're going to be looking at Acts chapter 8 as Paul heads to Rome. But before we do, we're going to start with a fun question, and it goes like this. What do you think of storm chasers? It just seems so funny to me. Usually it's like personal opinions. This is just random. Like,
how it was worded made me think of like a Jerry Seinfeld stand-up. Was like, what's the deal with storm chasers?
What's the deal with these? And it says, what do you think of storm chasers? Do you think you would ever, and have you ever chased a storm? I don't know. Was this in a book as well? Because this sounds like you made this up, not like these are random get to know you questions. You can get, those are more open-ended. It's like,
yeah. I think I was just thinking about, the shipwreck and the storms from the week before.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
There you go.
That's crazy.
It ties in. Sometimes it ties in.
Yeah.
Sometimes it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you just saw the movie Twisters, and if that was just on your mind.
I mean, recently, but not right before this question.
Okay.
There's a new Twisters.
Did you see the new one?
Yeah, Twisters.
Yeah.
Well, the original is just Twister.
Twister.
And so the new one is Twisters with an S.
Okay. Well, yes.
So I was saying that correctly.
Because there's two. Multiple Twisters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot like the first one, except evidently more
Nice.
tornadoes.
less cow going through the air and more tornadoes.
Lots of the same things.
Uh-huh.
We better get to the basement. Hurry.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff.
I showed the kids the original. They liked it.
Sure. I wrote that down on my paper.
What, the
movie.
The movie?
Because when I think of storm chasers, that was my... So I went and looked, because I was like, when did that come out? I was 6 or 7 years old.
When did it come out?
96.
96.
Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah.
6 or 7.
But I watched that. We had it on VHS, so we just
Yeah. VHS.
Rewind that and watch it again.
Awesome. You're dating yourself.
And so I'm answering the question now. I guess it's my turn.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think of them? Have you ever chased a storm?
Wait, when you were like 6, how old were you? 6 years old, 7 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get a moment of total honesty here. 7-year-old Craig was watching and rewinding Twister.
So I don't know if when it came out I was watching it.
Oh,
but
later.
Later.
You had it on
you had
VHS.
VHS.
I see what you're saying. It was on VHS, so you had it for posterity,
right?
Sake,
and
sure,
yeah.
So when I hear Storm Chaser, I just think of that movie.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I was like, "This is awesome." Mm-hmm. Like, look at them just tracking these twisters down and throwing their science up into it and tracking it and
what was it called? Was it
Dorothy?
Dorothy, yeah.
Yep. So I just thought it was super cool. But growing up in the Midwest, I was trained by my dad to walk out on the porch when there was weather, and I remember sitting on our back porch and seeing a tornado probably like 10 miles away, just watching it. And that's just what you do.
Yeah.
Have I ever chased one? No.
Right.
Would I? Maybe not in my Toyota Corolla, but in a, they have the vehicles with like the roll cages on it and stuff that they use. Would I ride along in that?
If you knew someone who's like a professional or whatever that looks like, you'd be like, yeah, I'll go ride with you.
Yeah, I would consider it.
If someone else had the roll cage, I can see that.
Just need the roll cage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not trusting my car.
Yeah, no joke.
That's not going to work.
I think I grew up in Texas, and like moving from there to here, like it's not even comparable. Like we had so much more. Like the storm. I came here thinking I've seen Wizard of Oz. This is where it happens, and I'm like, this barely happens. Like it was all the time. We were up in the Panhandle of Texas, and it just was way more intense, way more everything. And so I grew up also it just being normal, just standing out. I remember very vividly, second grade, my stepdad Kip was like, "Come look at this," and I was like, "Whoa!" And it was just like a ball of like dense clouds, and you could see it. I remember you could see all of it. It was just this one time compacted. You could see the lightning like constantly coming, and we were just like, "Whoa, that's pretty cool."
Yeah.
So just very used to it, and it's not that I'm trying to. Like with my own kids, they're just scared. Like they don't, like it doesn't happen as much, and so I try to. Like, come look at it. It's fine. And they're like, no, shut the door. Don't go out, especially Selah. And I'm trying to like get them to actually be comfortable just so it's not like you don't need to freak out.
I remember one time
it's going to be okay.
When my dad finally, it came to the point where he was like, get in the basement.
Right.
That's when I was like, this is serious.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You sure?
Well, and so that's what I thought. Like, what do I think of them? I don't have an opinion one way or the other. Like, that's what they want to do. I don't, unless someone was like, I like what you said, unless someone else has the roll cage and someone else has it, and then, yeah, maybe, but I don't really have a desire to go. I grew up around tornadoes so much that, like, even from a young age, I knew the things to do. What happens if we get caught in a car and it's like tornadoes, we can't get inside? You get out of the car. Do not stay in your car during a tornado because they'll higher chance to flip. Get underneath an overpass, otherwise get in some sort of ditch. Like I knew these things kind of like, a fire drill at school. Like I just, so anyway, but at the same time, I enjoyed it if I was in my house. And so, yeah, I would stay inside or I'd stay outside right up until I physically felt the danger, like, whoa, it's windy. And so then I'd be like, okay, let's go inside. But otherwise, I don't know. What do I think people do? I don't know what people who do it.
We hear the building creaking right now.
Dude, it is creaking hard right now.
I don't know if they probably won't be able to hear it on the recording, but
I doubt it.
No.
Very windy outside right now in the second story of this metal building.
Yes.
That has recently been screwed back together. So this is
good.
better than it has in the past.
The groanings
But
of
still,
this. Yeah, you can hear it.
Yeah.
Especially in the gym. It's like
freaky.
It's
right
really loud. Yeah.
Talking about it, yeah.
Yeah, think about it. Yeah, we are up high. We're on the second story right now.
Right.
And there's a window right there.
We are not
me.
in the safe place.
Yeah.
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 I think we're gonna be all right.
If there's a tornado, though, nowhere in this building, like
not
we have to
really.
just leave this whole building.
Right.
No matter where it is, we got to go next door.
Yeah.
This is not the place to be.
Yeah. Like several years ago, we used to have to hang a sign on a room in this building, storm shelter. Mm-hmm. You know, that was sort of ridiculous.
Like there's a room in this building.
Yeah, Craig's office.
That's where people should have gone.
Craig's office is the storm shelter
in
this building.
Why not just go to the other building?
Well,
in case you don't have time.
I think because the school met here, there had to be in this building someplace.
Okay.
That you designated the storm shelter.
No, your office. Yours has the window and stuff. So
yeah, it's just the middle-most room in this building, right? Yeah,
the furthest from the walls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good luck. This building, I don't know if we still are, but like a lot of years ago, this is probably almost 20 years ago. I mean, almost when I started here. So 17, 18 years, something like that. The Red Cross asked if they could use this as a Red Cross emergency shelter. Mm. And sure, sign us up, right? And I just remember thinking, though, like, if there's a...
If there's a tornado in the area, this probably won't be here.
These are the buildings that go.
Right, yes.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah. And so I was like, yeah, if we're around, absolutely. So.
Well, what about you, with as far as storm chasers go?
Yeah, I think that's a little ridiculous. I don't think just a little ridiculous. Yeah. And just so many things you guys have said. Like, I do think it's weird. Like, when I was a kid, I don't remember every storm being talked about as the end of the world kind of thing. And now that's much more the case. I can see why kids seem to be more anxious about those because they're so, which probably, I mean, I don't want to, if anybody's ever really been in the middle of one of those, a storm, serious storm, I mean, don't make light of that. I'm not trying to make light of that. But because we need all the warning we can get and all that stuff. But we do seem to...
There's like a lot of YouTube videos out there.
Seem to really overcompensate for some of that or something. Yeah.
So
I wouldn't chase a storm.
Yeah.
No.
No desire?
Not really. I don't. No. This is sort of like growing up in high school. Like sometimes, the high school kids would do things high schoolers did, at least back in the day. And my friends would say, "Hey, we're gonna TP so-and-so's house. Do you want to go?" And I just never, every time, no, I don't want to do that.
Right.
That sounds like a terrible idea. And they'd be like, "Why?" Well, at some point we're going to have to run away. Right? And I just want to know, how far I'm going to be the last one running away.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. And so anything you might have to run away from eventually, I don't want to get in the middle of. I'm going to be the last one running away.
Whether it's TP a house or a tornado.
The tornado, the first one, the bear, all those things, right? I'm the guy you just need to be faster than.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you will be. So I don't think I want to do that.
All right. Well, there you go. Yeah, I don't even know anyone who does that.
I had some friends in high school that went and did the classes and became certified storm chasers.
Yeah.
Whoa, I didn't know you could do. I mean, I didn't know that was something that was taught.
Yeah. I mean, I know firemen, first responders. Firemen sometimes will have to hang out in different places, and so yeah.
Okay.
Sure, they come up here sometimes.
I didn't think about that.
And they're looking for the storms.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. As we move on, we're going to be looking at a couple of questions this week. We're going to start with question number 3. And it says, how do the leaders describe the church in verse 22? What are some of the dangerous misconceptions about the church in today's world? And what, if anything, should we do about these misconceptions? Like, how do we react to them? Right. So I'll just give a little context. It says in verse 22, like, the leaders then describe the church as this. It says, when they were talking to Paul, it says, "But we want to hear what your views are, for we know that people everywhere are talking against this sect." And so they called it a sect, and it's like people are talking against it. So they finally had Paul there to kind of explain more about what it is. Right. So what are, that's nothing new. Like, it's a trend we still see to this day about what people can say against the church. And I guess it depends on when the church is, like when throughout history or where it is, what people will say against it. Right. So what are some of those misconceptions today, and how do you handle those? Craig, what did you have?
Yeah, I just kind of started to try to make a list, or just my first thoughts of like
all the things.
Yeah, I mean, it could be endless.
Yeah.
But I just thought, what do people outside of the church think about the church. And yeah, that list could be long. And some of the first things I thought was, it's stuff that I probably thought growing up when I was outside of the church. But, a group of people that might think they're better, and like rule followers, and that's from the outside perspective of, everyone might not be welcome. It's everyone that kind of looks and acts the same, and that sort of thing. It's like a club of people, and so that's kind of what I was thinking, and also too, I was thinking about Acts when how people viewed the church, and like they called it the way. At one point, it gets like followers of Jesus are called Christians, and I thought about that label, that name, and Christian is little Christ, like to be imitators, followers of Christ, and I heard one time that like when that term started to be used and be, I guess you could say, thrown around in the ancient world, it was sometimes used as a negative thing, like people are trying to make themselves little messiahs, and then the church would push back and be like, well, yeah, that's what we want to do, is imitate Jesus, and so that's what I was thinking for, like, what do you do about misconceptions, and really, like, that's where we need to point our attention and our direction, live in a way so that the misconceptions, the assumptions of who we might be, they just fall flat on their face. Because a lot of people can look at Christianity and think, well, it's just, we're just trying to follow rules, and like maybe make us feel better about our sin or whatever that is. But that's the opposite of what we're doing.
Right.
And Jesus talks about how the kingdom, the church, is not for healthy people, and Jesus is the one that cleans us up, and we follow after him. And Paul, I thought of 1 Corinthians 11 when Paul says, "Follow me as I follow Christ," and that's really like we should live in a way that we're confident in saying, like, "Hey, I'm doing what I can to follow after Jesus."
Yeah.
And so you can look at my life and get a view of what the church looks like, what living in the kingdom looks like. Obviously, we see that in Paul, in his life. I think we've talked about that numerous times as we've followed his missionary journeys. I was thinking about that, like these patterns over and over that we see of Paul throughout Acts, and like over and over, he's just like, look at my life, look at what I'm doing. And we should be able to do that and push back against the misconceptions and assumptions that people might have.
Yeah. I think what makes this question so hard is that people are probably right when they're like, oh, the church just wants this or whatever. They probably have real life examples of what they've seen. And the problem is, we read this and we're like, the church. And it's like, this really was just the church. It was a small group that was growing. And now when people say the church, if I'm feeling a little bit more antagonistic or like if combative, I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. What church? Who said that? Where did that? What's their denomination? What's their background? Because it's not in my mind, when you say, oh, well, all Christians or the church, it's like, it's so big that it's everything. Like, oh, well, this church is really judgmental, and maybe they are. Maybe the church that you grew up in was. Does that mean they all are? Does that mean all Christians are? Is that the foundation that they believe? And so it's hard because there may be some truth to the complaints people have, either because they don't go to church, and so the only thing you're going to see on the news is what sells. So that they're seeing only a fraction of what makes the news, or they really had a bad experience, and but it's a very limited experience of what Christianity is, and then also. Like you said, the church is for the sick, the sinners. When people are like, the church is full of hypocrites, and you're like, yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly where we want them to be. Like people who don't live consistent lives, we want them to come to church. The problem is, once they're in church, it takes a while, right? That people still live hypocritically or struggle with anger or anything else, and so it's just a bunch of messed up people. And So there's the misconceptions about the church is, I say the biggest misconception is that whatever complaint someone has, they just attribute it to all Christians. And I'm like, that's the biggest thing. Like, you have to have, we talked about today when we were talking about the election coming up and politics, and you mentioned the word nuance, and we don't have that word a lot when it comes to politics, but also to like religion or things like that. People just cast a wide net and say, this is what it must be like. Yeah. And so, you know, what do we do about this? I mean, I think I get angry. No. No, I put literally like with humility and conviction, trying to move forward with this. And so, number one, living faithfully, like Jesus. So you said, you know, follow me as I follow Christ. I think, living it out, right? That I always like to be the one where if someone says, yeah, all Christians are like this, except for this one person, like, that one person does, like, if talking about me or whatever, like Zach doesn't. I mean, they all may, but I at least know one. And so trying to be that, you know, in my friend's life who don't go to church, the sort of thorn in their side of their argument, like, okay, well, they don't all do that. But also I said, don't shy away from people's objections. I think sometimes we're too guarded and we're like, you know, quick to defend. I'm quick to say like, yeah, you're probably right. Like when they talk about church hurt or whatever, I'm like, hey, thank you for sharing. And also, you know, that must be really difficult, and that's not what Jesus wanted. And some churches are like that. Or the church is full of hypocrites. I'm like, yeah, we are. Mm-hmm. You know, but there's trying to help them, but trying to teach and show the bigger picture, to point to the truth of, you know, make them think through harder of what they're trying to claim. Are all Christians really like this? And so that's been my, you know, my area is working with students. So that's sort of how I've worked through when the students are like, yeah, but aren't all Christians this? Or, and trying to do that with humility and truth, walking them through all of that. But it'll never end. I mean, there's going to be more churches and more problems, and also just more sinful people who don't want to listen, and it's both sides. So it's just being consistent and being like Jesus, and that's all you can really do, I think. Yeah. But what about you?
Oh, I thought about some different kinds of labels, I guess, than you guys have mentioned. Like, you know, I hear sometimes, and I tried to get at this Sunday without, it wasn't time, or maybe wasn't an appropriate forum to kind of air all our grievances or whatever, you know, and kind of walk through some of these things. But I tried to get at the fact that it seems like when the church turns on itself, right, when believers start arguing amongst ourselves, that this stuff is really the most damaging. Like when the world hurls these insults at the church, you know, like both of you have said, that's always been true. You know, when the Romans accused the church of being atheists because they didn't worship Roman gods. Right. Well, you know, I guess from that standpoint, that's true. Yeah. Right? They worship this one God, and you know, they were accused of orgies because of the love feast, and this agape meal that they shared, and accused of being cannibals because of the body and blood of Jesus, and some of those things. And that's just rumors that kind of get spread, right. and that's always going to be true in the world. And I think when believers without any discernment kind of grab hold of those and say, oh, they must be true because of this one lone experience, or because of these isolated examples, or because some expert told me they were true, then that's really dangerous, and we should kind of turn on ourselves. I think about, you know, I've dealt with some friends who would talk about, you know, people would say something like, the church is only about money. Right, you hear that sometimes, and for sure there probably have been greedy church leaders. Not probably, there have been greedy church leaders, right, and probably greedy churches that were kind of, that really drives them or whatever. Man, it just hasn't been my experience,
right,
and along those lines, some church folks who kind of are dealing with some church hurt and kind of walked away from some of those bad situations, who would say you won't stand up for your convictions because you only want to keep your church, your tax exempt status. Mm-hmm. This is a thing among churches, right? And man, I'm just like, I don't know how many hundreds, I don't want to oversell this, but like hundreds of elders and leadership meetings in the church, and I can't remember one time that the church's tax exempt status was discussed. That we have to do this to make sure we remain tax exempt. For the bulk of the time I've served Wallula, I've just expected at some point, well, they're going to reverse this stuff. They're going to take away church's tax exempt status. And it just doesn't, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we will figure that out.
Right.
And we're going to move on. And so just some of that weirdness. I think right now we're dealing with, this idea of, you'll hear these words like Christian nationalism. Okay, well, what does Christian nationalism mean? If we had to define Christian nationalism, how do we define that? And I guess that's the idea that we want to be a Christian nation and a Christian nation only, right? And again, that's one of those things where you have to unpack, don't you? And think through a little bit. And man, do I want everyone in the United States to come to a saving faith in Jesus? Yeah. Right? And do I want everybody to live their life under the lordship of Jesus? Yeah. Right? And so should that play out in our national policies and laws that we make and all of that? Well, I would think so. Yeah. And so does that make me a Christian nationalist? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think so, right? That I want that to be an outgrowth of everyone's personal decision to follow Jesus. That's not what people mean when they're using this term Christian nationalist, right? Yeah. And they're talking about this subverted group who is trying to take over the government from the inside out or whatever. And generally those are white middle-aged people who are thrown into that category, probably men mostly, thrown into that category.
Yeah.
And so if you walk down the street and you said, hey, I know this guy who is the preacher at Wallula Christian Church, do you suppose he's a Christian nationalist? What percentage of people would say yeah?
Yeah.
Right? We just all get thrown in and tossed into this whole thing. There are these wild books and documentaries that I've read and watched recently. I read this book a couple years ago, I guess. Jesus and John Wayne was the title, and it was all kind of this, how toxic masculinity invaded the church and overtook it, and now the church is racist and all this stuff. And I just remember reading that book. And it throws around some of these terms like evangelicals. It said the evangelicals. And I'm like, well, who are the evangelicals, right? And they would group, and probably lots of people would say, well, Wallula Christian Church is an evangelical church. And again, you unpack that term a little bit. I hope so in a lot of ways, and that the word evangelical means to evangelize, right? And I want Wallula to be sharing the story of Jesus. But in a whole nother way, that word gets used as like this group or this political movement that I've just never identified with. Right? I don't think largely Wallula Christian Church identifies with, but it's just a term that's used to blanket believers everywhere, like we were talking about, Zach. And I remember reading that book, Jesus and John Wayne, and it grouped even Christian leaders through the years, and it would say this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, and they all thought alike would be kind of the idea. And I'm like, whoa. It was like that old Sesame Street song, right? One of these things doesn't belong here, and they just all got grouped together by the author. And I'm like, I know that guy is not exactly like this guy,
right?
And that for instance, James Dobson, Focus on the Family. This book, man, they did not like Focus on the Family, and they just kind of railed against James Dobson. And I don't know James Dobson personally, right? I don't know. I'm sure he's had his ups and downs, just like all of us, right? But they would categorize him along with, Jerry Falwell.
Oh, really?
The same sort of, same movement. They're on the same side. They're doing the same thing. And it's just like one of these ministries is really different from the other.
Yeah.
And so they're just different people with different agendas.
Right.
And it's not all the same. But again, that's the sort of identity we just all get thrown in together, and that's really happening in today's world with the words like evangelicals and white Christian nationalists. And it's just, we're not all the same and not all driven by those things. And
so, what do you think we should do about? Or like, what do Christians do when
I
they
think
feel?
we should get online.
Open a Twitter account.
Say no more. I'm already ahead of you.
Just really let it out. No, I mean, you guys have nailed it, right?
Yeah.
All you can do is, and that's why I say, I think the real danger is when believers sort of, they take in all this information, and then they say, "Oh, this must be true," And even though it really hasn't been my experience, and it's not what I've seen happen in the church, it must be true. And probably it is somewhere in some regard, right? But man, just that we have to remember that one bad example doesn't change who Jesus is, right?
Yeah.
Just like that. The conversation you had with me when you thought I was too short, or that man, why was he angry? He shouldn't be angry about that, or whatever it is. However, he told me one thing and did the other. I'm sure that's happened, and that doesn't change who Jesus is just because the preacher Lance screwed up, right? No matter how big or small, and all of church history, no matter how big or small that deviation from Christ is, it doesn't change who Jesus is. And so we have to keep chasing after him, and we have to hold on to our own experiences and just live like him where we are. That's the difference we can make, right? And so you guys have nailed it when you say, oh yeah, we want to represent Jesus well, so we want to love like him where we are. I mean, I wish I had a better answer, right? I wish I could take it away or clear it up somehow. But until he returns and every knee bows and every tongue confesses, that's what we're to do, I think.
Yeah. I as we look ahead, kind of at wrapping up the whole book of Acts and the second part of Acts 28, we have Paul talking about the church and kind of explaining to the people what this new sect is really like, and correcting their misunderstandings about it. And so we have him proclaiming the kingdom of God. So the question number 9 that we're looking at is, when you think of someone proclaiming the kingdom of God, quote unquote, what are you picturing? What do you think of when someone says that phrase? And what does that look like for us in just an everyday situation as we proclaim the kingdom of God? How can we do it? Not just like doing it louder, but how can we be effective when it comes to proclaiming? Craig, what did you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, we were headed there because, like what Lance said, really just proclaiming where you are. And I think that using that word proclaim makes us think about like preaching a sermon and like having this speech ready to go and that kind of thing, which is like, you should be ready to share the gospel at all times. But I think in our world, it's so noisy and loud, and everyone is trying to get your attention, and you're trying to get other people's attention. And so when we joked, but getting online, it's like everyone is, trying.
As soon as you said it, I just started cracking up.
Yeah.
First things first, get online.
Because it's insane.
Right.
And a lot of people get on there with the intention of expressing their opinions and feelings and thoughts. And most of the time I don't see those conversations ending well. And so when I think about proclaiming the gospel and what that looks like, it's seemingly like it's pretty ordinary and living day to day following Jesus. And so it's not shouting our opinions and letting them be known in that regard, but it's, if we're going to follow after the way that Jesus did it, like living in close relationship with people, getting to know people, loving people and serving them, the things that Paul did, like went to the extremes to let people know about the gospel, used his resources and energy and time for the kingdom. And really, like, that proclaiming it's what we see in the New Testament is like the kingdom is present, and the opportunity to follow Jesus starts now.
Yeah.
And it's not just far off into the future, into eternity, but your life with Jesus can start now. And I think letting people know that, because I think maybe that's a little bit of a misconception about Christianity is, well, it's something later because you die and you go to heaven. But you can live now for the kingdom and be a person that tells people about Jesus and invites them in.
Right. And
when I think about the kingdom, I think about the parables. Matthew, 13? The hidden treasure. When this guy in the parable finds the hidden treasure in the field and realizes it's better than anything else, he sells everything to have the field and have the treasure. And so that's really how we need to live. We talked about politics a lot lately.
Yeah.
We're a week away from election. And if we are members of the kingdom, we're going to live in a way that shows that we treasure God's kingdom and his authority and lordship so much more than anything else on earth, and not put our hope in these fragile things that will change and go away and not be there forever. And so just standing firm on the promises of Jesus and what he has for us. I think just doing that in the ordinary day-to-day is a way to proclaim the kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with like you said, in the everyday day-to-day type stuff, Lance, when you were talking about what were some of the accusations, the early church, and it's cannibalistic and incestuous, and all these things that you're just like, holy cow, that is intense. And it's like, what did the church do? Did they rally around all those accusations and say, we gotta go on this campaign to? No, all they did was in the day-to-day, they just continued to it did not affect them in what they were supposed to do, which is like when it comes to loving others and living a life of holiness. And so,
and we haven't seen that in a while in Acts, but like early on, those things were mentioned a lot.
Yeah. And
then we get to missionary journeys, but like those things were still happening.
Right. Yeah. And so I think on one hand, it's like it's the day-to-day stuff that's not that extraordinary, stuff that may even seem kind of boring, like proclaiming the kingdom. But one of the things I put was like, what does it look like practically to proclaim the kingdom of God? I put live to change life. And I said, it's not a perfect life, but your life has changed to where like it's better now than it was a year ago. Like there's growth. So the person who is, had a really bad life and all the addiction and whatever else, like following Jesus has made that there's some sort of transformation that's coming, and you still have a ways to go, right? We're still works in progress, but one of the ways is just proclaiming the kingdom by our day-to-day lives of how we speak, how we treat others, how we take his word seriously. So the changed life. I also put like words and actions, like just what we say, what's the quote of like, preach the word, use words when possible or something like that. I'm like, or do both.
Priests would always use words if necessary.
Use words if necessary. It's like, hey, through your actions, which I get, but I'm also like, no, you should also speak. Like, it's not just like, I'm only going to love people. No, you should love people, but also there's a truth aspect of, knowing what you believe and why. So anyway, I said words and actions, but, showing attention to those that you're close to, but specifically when you think of like the sick and the poor and the needy. And so I think as a church and as Christians and Christianity as a whole, I preached about this last year, but just talking about the impact the church has made just in the local church in its area makes more of an impact than almost any other organization, just because of that's our design. Like we are trying to care for those around us. Mm-hmm. And so when we care for people, we care for the kingdom. When we care about what's true, we care for the kingdom. When we care about our own holiness and trying to improve, we're, proclaiming the kingdom. So it's easy to think like, well, I'm not smart enough, or I don't know the words to say. And when I think of proclaiming the kingdom, you think of a guy I don't know why I thought this, but like on a street corner, proclaiming, or, on a college campus with a bullhorn. And it's really just, it's kind of the opposite. And what I think really is, like you said, the day-to-day stuff. It's when everything else is going crazy in the world, politics, or back in the times of Rome. And it's like the church just keeps moving forward. It's almost like, and maybe I shouldn't use this comparison, but I'm trying to think of a modern day comparison of like, what's a group that does this, is the Amish. You could say whatever you want about the Amish. Tomorrow, they're going to get up probably at 4:30 a.m. I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter anything. And they're just going to keep doing what they do. And so there's something about that that is refreshing, where it's like, sure, they're going to keep, and I'm not saying we should all be Amish, but I think there's parts of, different denominations. Huh?
You guys have beards.
I need to shave my mustache. I can just get the
that's right.
Lincoln look. Yeah. But I think not letting the world influence us one way or the other is an example as well. So proclaiming the gospel, making disciples, teaching and loving. Yeah. What about you, Lance?
When I hear the phrase "proclaim the gospel," right, I think about John the Baptist, and then Jesus, right, ushering in the kingdom. And so you go back to Mark chapter 1, and you know it's kind of in the middle of chapter 1. It says, well, John was arrested, and so Jesus started to preach and share the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is near, right? Here it comes. And so that's what I think about. And when you think about those characters, John the Baptist, and what was this guy about? Well, he camel skin, and he ate honey and bugs, and he's out in the wilderness, and he was just, so when you think about maybe that guy on the street corner, I mean, that's kind of John the Baptist. He just had a weird street corner, and but there's just so much weird about him, and that weird set him apart. And I just think, man, we ought to live lives that are set apart for Jesus. And I don't know if that means like the Amish who dress a certain way. You mentioned, well, John the Baptist dressed a certain way. And is there something about how we dress that ought to set us apart from others? I don't, you take that too far or whatever, but man, these everyday life decisions, there probably ought to be some that set us apart from others.
Right.
Like what we're pouring into ourselves, thinking about what we watch and listen to and digest and all those things, and where we go and who we hang out with. Can that all get judgmental and all? For sure, but probably there needs to be some separation from the rest of the world. And I think about John the Baptist as an example of that. You read Mark chapter 1, and I don't know, over and over, so many times, it uses this word immediately. The Spirit immediately. It took, Jesus here, or immediately the Spirit descended on Jesus, or immediately after he was baptized, the Spirit descended. And so, the disciples, Jesus called his first disciples, and immediately they followed him, right? And I just think, in this moment right now, we can be proclaiming the kingdom. It's not something, I think you guys mentioned this, it's not something you put off till later, that we'll figure out later or on Sunday or whatever. No, right now, you are living for Jesus. And so that doesn't mean you're standing up in the middle of the office and I have a word from the Lord I'd like to share with you right now, but it does mean that you're, building that foundation through relationships, earning the right to be heard, and at some point you're going to have an opportunity to speak up for Jesus, and then being willing to do that. So I just think immediately we're doing that. We're set apart, and then in Mark chapter 1, Jesus comes on the scene after his baptism, and like I said, John is arrested, and so Jesus starts going into these towns, and he's healing and he's teaching, and I just think there's so many opportunities we have to love others around us right now. I think about things going on at Wallula Christian Church, like the Shelter of Hope and Third Thursdays, and this teacher lunch this Thursday. I mean, just those are not big things, and obviously we're not picking up a guy who's never walked and helping him walk or whatever, like Jesus did. But they are, I don't know, microcosms. They're that love and the way that we can share it and show it. And those are just examples from kind of the church at large. But how many different examples could there be of you showing, love and concern for folks around you? All week. I mean, whatever your situation, you can think about those opportunities where, I could be like Jesus in this moment.
Yeah. And I think also when you bring up like the Third Thursday and whatever else, it's not just, it's such a small thing, like we just do one night a week, but when you look back and realize like it kind of compounds, like we've been doing this for years, like almost a decade, I think.
Right.
And so whether it comes to like the church itself or us individually, just not giving up, like continuing to just like do good things for others, continue to let Jesus change what we do and how we speak and how we interact. And over time, you look back and you're like, wow, I've done a lot. I'm not going to do a lot right now.
Right.
Today is not going to be a lot, but not giving up. And I think that's one of the biggest things I see is just Christians or churches, when we succumb to what the world says or does or get distracted by, we stop doing the simple things that continue, like help us to continue on the path to be like Jesus and keep proclaiming. And so, so I'm thankful for, that I get to be, I always feel like I'm one part of like a long story of this church. Then after I leave, there'll be people who keep doing it, and it's just, we get to keep proclaiming. Right. All right, I'm done. I have nothing else to add. But thank you guys for being with us. We are done with Acts. We will tune in next week, and you can find out where we're going to be going next. But have enjoyed going through this with you two, and we'll see you next week.